Hey, friend, can I share something that completely changed how I understand God? For years after my spiritual world fell apart, I was terrified to trust what I thought might be God's voice. How could I tell the difference between His gentle guidance and the harsh voices that had claimed to speak for Him? I remember thinking, what if I'm being deceived? What if I can't tell the difference between truth and trauma? Because here's the thing. When you've experienced religious trauma, every spiritual voice starts to sound suspicious. But then I discovered something beautiful. God's real voice sounds nothing like the voices that caused harm, nothing like shame, manipulation, or fear. And today, I want to share with you how to recognize the difference. We're continuing our journey through the healing pillars with pillar number 2, instill the truth. This is where we discover who God really is when no one else is speaking for Him. We'll walk through 4 powerful milestones that can take you from feeling unloved and like a failure to understanding you're exactly who God created you to be. So settle in with me and let's discover what God's true voice actually sounds like and why it's the most healing sound your soul will ever hear. Welcome back to our 3-part series on the healing pillars that form the heart of the coming home journey. If this is your first time joining us, these 3 episodes will walk you through the path from religious trauma to spiritual freedom. Unravel the trauma, instill the truth, and create a new story. Whether you're just beginning to recognize the impact of religious trauma, or you're ready to step into deeper healing, these pillars will meet you where you are and guide you forward. Welcome to Healing Religious Trauma, the podcast for Christian women ready to heal without losing their faith. If you're feeling the weight of spiritual pressure and distant from the God you used to trust, you're in the right place. I'm Debra, spiritual healing coach, founder of the Healing Religious Trauma Circle, and someone who's walked the hard road of untangling toxic faith. If you're ready to make sense of your story, find peace with a safe, loving God, and hear stories that remind you you're not alone, grab your tea, toss the rule book, and let's go. What if I told you that feeling distant from God doesn't mean you're a bad Christian? What if your questions aren't rebellion, but actually evidence of a seeking heart? What if the very things you've been told are wrong with you are actually signs that you're ready for something deeper? Here's what I've discovered after walking with dozens of women through their healing. The women who question, who feel deeply, who long for authentic connection with God, they're not the problem. They're the ones brave enough to seek truth. The coming home journey is built on hope. The hope that you can heal without losing your faith, that you can find God's true heart beneath all the noise, and that you can step into the freedom He always intended for you. Over 6 months, you'll move through 12 milestones that gently transform how you see God, yourself, and your purpose. Not through force or pressure, but through the kind of gentle healing that actually lasts. Your story doesn't end with confusion or distance from God. It ends with coming home to His love in a way that feels safe, real, and beautifully yours. Discover what's possible at thecominghomejourney.com. You know, one of the most confusing parts of my healing journey was learning to distinguish between God's voice and the voices of the godly people I love so deeply and serve so willingly. Because here's the thing, it was never all bad. There was so much love and goodness and wonderful things. I wouldn't be who I am today without my loved ones pouring into me like they did. And I had a beautiful marriage, a beautiful home, people who genuinely cared about me. But somewhere along the way, I started believing that the voice of authority was the voice of God. I put my trust in people more than in God Himself. And eventually, it all just became one voice in my mind. I wasn't allowed to experiment or make mistakes, so my own will became weak. I accepted the control of others because I thought that was faith. In my book, I call this quote the great contradiction, how something can be filled with love and goodness while still causing deep harm. The harmful things were never addressed because they were all wrapped up in so much genuine care and spiritual language. But here's what was missing: true, deep honesty without conditions. Nothing felt truly sacred, even though sacredness was always talked about, because everybody knew everybody else's business. There were no real boundaries, no space for my own relationship with God to develop. It wasn't until I left everything behind that I slowly began to hear the difference. God's voice, I discovered, sounds nothing like control wrapped in love. It doesn't bypass my free will or demand that I silence my questions. It doesn't require me to be perfect before I can approach Him. God's real voice is gentle. It honors my individuality. It invites me to bring my whole heart, questions, struggles, and all. It creates space for true intimacy instead of demanding performance. The most beautiful part? As I learned to trust God's voice, I also learned to trust my own intuition again, because He created that intuition. It's one of the ways He speaks to me. I didn't have to choose between trusting God and trusting myself. He was actually calling me back to both. That's when I realized that authentic faith isn't about silencing your inner voice. It's about learning to hear God's voice through it. You know, after you've done the work of unraveling religious trauma, there's this beautiful but sometimes scary question. Okay, so if what I was taught wasn't accurate, what is true about God? That's exactly what this pillar is about, instilling the truth of who God really is. We're going into the milestones again. This time we're going to talk about milestone 5, when you feel unloved. An inexpressible love heals me. The first thing many of us need to discover is that God's love looks nothing like the conditional love we experienced in religious trauma. Maybe you've been thinking, if they knew what I felt, what I questioned, would they still love me? Would God? Here's what I've learned. There's an ancient practice in Scripture called lament. It's honest worship where people poured out their hearts completely to God. My God, why have you forsaken me? How long, Lord? How long will you forget me forever? These weren't signs of spiritual failure. They were invitations to encounter God's heart. God doesn't flinch at your raw emotions. He welcomes your full expression because nothing is too much for Him. Not your fury, not your grief, not your questions. In those depths of sacred sorrow, you discover what the Hebrew word chesed means. God's inexpressible, unconditional love that meets you exactly where you are. You weren't unloved. You were under-nurtured. And God has been waiting for you to bring your whole heart to Him. Okay, milestone number 6. When you feel like a failure, I navigate my path with correct principles. The second truth we need to instill is that God's guidance doesn't come through crushing rules, but through life-giving principles. Maybe you've been thinking, I've done all the right things. Why does it feel still so wrong? Here's the difference. Religious trauma often operates through rigid rules that exhaust you, but God's kingdom operates through eternal principles, like gentleness over force, love as a decision rather than manipulation, and free will as sacred. These principles aren't measuring sticks for your worthiness. They're a compass for your direction. When you're wondering how to make a decision, you ask, how would gentleness guide me here? How would love respond? Instead of fear-based choices that try to avoid punishment, you make principle-based choices that flow from understanding God's heart. You're not a failure. You're learning to navigate by God's true character instead of human expectations. Okay, milestone number 7. When you feel different in the wrong way, discover the true science of salvation. The third truth is probably my favorite. God designed you with unique spiritual intelligence, and everything about you that feels different is actually divine design. Maybe you've been told you're too sensitive, too analytical, too emotional. But what if I told you that God created you with spiritual faculties like your will, conscience, your intuition, and imagination that are meant to work together as your connection to Him? Your sensitivity isn't a liability, it's how God speaks to you. Your analytical nature isn't dangerous, it's wisdom. Your emotional depth isn't too much, it's compassion. The heavenly algorithm shows us these faculties were hijacked by survival patterns, but healing them restores them to their intended purpose. You're not different in the wrong way. You're exactly who God intended you to be, with exactly the spiritual intelligence He wants to use through you. Okay, milestone number 8. When you feel like you don't matter. The divine healing principles of Jesus. The final truth that transforms everything. You matter so much to God that Jesus tailored His approach to every single person He met. He never healed 2 people the same way because each person mattered enough to receive His full attention and customized care. Maybe you've been thinking, other people's needs always come first. Mine weren't even on the list. But when you study how Jesus treated people, especially those who were shamed, silenced, or marginalized, you see that He looked them in the eye, listened without judgment, and made room for their full humanity. Jesus is still using these same healing methods today. Your needs aren't too much for Him. Your inner life matters completely. You're worthy of individual attention, not because of what you accomplished, but because God placed immeasurable value on you when He created you. All right, let's bring this all together. So when I talk about instilling the truth, this is what I mean. Discovering that God's love is unconditional. His guidance comes through gentle principles. Your uniqueness is divine design, and you matter so much that He meets you exactly where you are. This is what God's real voice sounds like. Gentle, loving, honoring your free will, celebrating your uniqueness, and never, ever shaming you for being exactly who He created you to be. In 6 months, you could be living a completely different story. Instead of feeling anxious around God, you could feel safe. Instead of second-guessing every spiritual decision, you could trust your own discernment. Instead of feeling invisible or not enough, you could stand confidently in who God created you to be. The Coming Home journey takes you through 12 specific milestones that address the exact barriers keeping you stuck. Each one builds on the last, creating real, lasting transformation that touches every area of your life. This isn't just about feeling better. It's about becoming the woman God always intended you to be. Free, loved, confident, and unshakable in your identity as His daughter. Ready to transform your story? Start your journey at thecominghomejourney.com. Hey friend, if this episode encouraged you and made you feel a little less alone, would you share it with someone who needs that too? And while you're at it, would you please leave a quick review on Apple Podcasts? It's like a virtual hug that helps more women find their way here. Next week, we're completing our series with Healing Pillar number 3, Creating a New Story, Permission to Rewrite Your Faith Without Losing God. We'll explore how to step into the freedom God always intended for you. Until then, remember, you're deeply loved, you're not a failure, you're perfectly designed, and you matter immensely to God. His real voice sounds like love, and it's been calling your name all along. I'll see you next time.